Welcome back to Patrick Christie tonight. Still to come, massive statements from Angela Rayner. She's promised that Labour will evenly distribute migrants across the country. That's illegal migrants, by the way. So should every part of the UK really take their, quotes, fair share? We'll be talking about that at 10. But first, I welcome Reform UK's Immigration and Justice spokesperson, it's Widdecombe. Now, Nigel Farage held a rally in Sunderland earlier today, attended by more than 1,000 people, where he slammed the state of the British political landscape.
The Conservatives deserve to lose this election, but Labour don't deserve to win. I know there is a silent majority of people out there that in their hearts feel the same way as we do. This is but the first step of a very big and a very important journey.
Well, Reform UK leader's popularity with the public, it's hard to ignore or deny, actually, is it? With the support for his party seeming to rise with pretty much every poll. But not everyone's sure it's a good thing.
It's interesting you bring up Nigel, because I think Nigel is the same as Jeremy Corbyn in a way, that he's the wrong messenger for what he's wanting to sell. And I think there are some similarities there, although I imagine Twitter is about to call me all sorts of names right now.
And I will bring in Anne Widdecombe now. Is there a cult of personality forming around Nigel Farage here?
No, I wouldn't describe it as a cult. What I would say is he's got a huge personality and he's got charisma, which is sadly lacking in either Sunak or certainly in Starmer, who's very tedious indeed. And people were warm to that. Now, you know, Boris had charisma, Tony Blair. I don't like Tony Blair, but he had charisma. You know, throughout history, we've had leaders with charisma. There's nothing wrong with that. And if the public want to cheer on Nigel Farage, well, for years we've all been bleating that people no longer come out to public meetings. Well, they do now, don't they?
Well, they are in big numbers. And Nigel, I know, is hoping to sell out the Birmingham NEC, I think, on Sunday, which would be huge numbers if that happens, of course. I wonder, though, Anne, whether or not Reform has an issue just below the surface, right? Which is that because you are now on the march and you've had to do that quite quickly, all right, and you've swept up a lot of people with you because you need people out there canvassing, etc., whether or not now some of the candidates and some of the canvassers are actually quite unsavoury characters. So, for example, in Salisbury, one of them has hit the headlines after making comments that seem to praise Vladimir Putin. Julian Mallin's KC told a hustings event on Sunday, I've actually met Putin, had a 10-minute chat with him, and he seemed very good. He's not the Austrian gentleman with a moustache come alive again. The comments were particularly controversial, as apparently standing in the constituency of Salisbury, yes, of course, where the Novichok poisonings happened. Is this a problem?
Well, let's distinguish, first of all, between candidates and supporters. You can't... Supporters are self-selecting. They roll up at campaign headquarters and they ask to distribute leaflets or whatever it is. And, you know, there's no vetting process there, nor with any of the big parties. And unless you happen to recognise somebody and say, oh, that's a good thing, or, oh, dear, I'm not so sure, there is no way of deciding who comes and does that sort of donkey work or not. When it comes to candidates, that's an entirely different matter. There is a vetting process, which has failed in one or two cases. But also, I think we should listen to people who have views that maybe we don't like. We've rather lost the habit of being able to do that. And of course, once somebody does pounce on a view, it becomes exaggerated, a feeding frenzy follows. And I think that's rather a sad development. Now, as far as Putin goes, Nigel didn't say anything that Boris hadn't said 8 years ago. And yet we know, Patrick, that Boris was the very first Western leader to support Ukraine, to get our troops helping with training, to get equipment in there. He was praised by Zelensky. So what I'm saying is there's no contradiction between supporting Ukraine and holding...
I get that. No, I do get that. One thing I will say, though, Anne, is that shortly before we came on air, there were clips that were put out of an undercover investigation, or I don't know, whatever you'd want to call it, really, which showed a man canvassing for reform who did use a racial slur to describe Rishi Sunak. And that's awful, isn't it, for reform, or is it not?
Well, of course that's awful, yes. I'm not going to say that it's not awful. But on the other hand, what you've said is a man canvassing. You haven't said a candidate. And as I say, You know, it's very difficult to vet every individual who volunteers to help. You know, I mean, when I was helping the Conservatives in the young days when I wasn't named to anybody, I used to roll up at the campaign headquarters and I used to say, can I go canvassing, please? And I'd be handed canvass cards. They didn't know what I was going to say on the doorstep.
Yeah, and Nigel's comments to it were actually, when are you going to report on things that the Labour Party have said about drinking white people's tears and all of that stuff. But look, Anne, thank you very much for your time this evening. I hope to chat to you again very soon. I have to read now the full list of candidates standing in Salisbury. We've got Matt Aldridge, Labour, Victoria Charleston, Liberal Democrats, Julian Mallins, Reform UK, John Glenn, Conservative, Chris Harwood, Climate Party, Barney Norris Green, and King Arthur Pendragon, who is an independent, apparently.